Okay. So recipe conversions. So sometimes recipes don't come in the correct amounts that you need. Sometimes you need more, sometimes you need less. So when we don't have the correct amount, we have to convert that recipe or adjust that recipe either up or down, depending on what our needs are. Okay. A successful cook is knows how to read a recipe, know what the abbreviations are, know correct measuring techniques, which is all of those are stuff that you should have gone over yesterday in your recipe and measuring slides. Did everybody get that done yesterday? If not, you need to make sure that you go through that because that's going to make a difference. So also you need to know equivalents. There's certain equivalents that you need to know. You need to just know them. So for instance, 3 teaspoons equals 1 tablespoon. 8 ounces is a cup. 16 ounces is a pound. Like just some of those basic amounts you need to learn or know because you'll use them all the time in cooking, especially baking. Okay, which is what we're going to do first. And you also, to be a successful cook, you need to be able to change a recipe or adjust a recipe, and that's what we're going to be working on today. Equivalent measures. So volume. Can y'all see that? Let me zoom in a little bit. Is that better? Okay. So let's start with our volume. Let's look at a tablespoon. 1 tablespoon in the second column is equal to 3 teaspoons. Okay. So sometimes, let's say if you have to half a recipe, cut a recipe in half, you would need to convert tablespoons into teaspoons and then divide it in half. Yeah, you could say, oh, a half a tablespoon, but most of the time there is not a half a tablespoon measure. Some measuring spoons have that, but most of them don't. Okay, most of them have a tablespoon, a teaspoon, a half a teaspoon, and a fourth of a teaspoon. So it's easier to convert it to teaspoons, which is 3, and then divide it in half, which would give you 1.5 teaspoons. Also, it is a half an ounce. Okay. So if you're doing a tablespoon, it's equal to 3 teaspoons, and it's also equal to a half an ounce. 1/4 of a cup is equal to 4 tablespoons, which is equal to 2 ounces. You'll see this a lot, like when you're converting things. If you know, oh, 1/4 of a cup, what's half of a 1/4 of a cup? 1/8 of a cup. Well, we don't usually have 1/8 of a cup measuring cup, right? So we need to be able to convert it into tablespoons so then we can have 4 and we know we have 2 tablespoons. Does that make sense? Okay, because you got to look at what measuring utensils do you have in the kitchen. It's not just about math, it's about what measuring tools do you have that you can measure with. And if you don't have 1/8 of a cup, which sometimes there is 1/8 of a cup in certain measuring cups, but standard is 1 cup, half a cup, 1/3 of a cup, and 1/4 of a cup. So usually it's those 4. So most of the time you don't have that 1/8 in there. Okay. 1/3 of a cup is equal to 5 tablespoons and 1 teaspoon, or 16 teaspoons. Okay. When you are converting 1/3 of a cup, you need to convert it into teaspoons. And then let's say you're halving it. What's half of 16? 9, right? So it'd be 9 teaspoons. But do we want to measure 9 teaspoons? That's not going to be super accurate. There's more room for error. So we want to convert that into however many tablespoons we can do, and then how many teaspoons. So 9 teaspoons would be how many tablespoons? How many tablespoons and how many teaspoons would be left with 9 teaspoons reduced down to the smallest measure of unit of measure. Does that make sense? Or excuse me, I said 8. I said 9, I meant 8 teaspoons. Sorry, my math is off. So 8 teaspoons. How many tablespoons can we get out of 8 teaspoons? Alexis, how many tablespoons can we get out of 8 teaspoons? Unmute and talk to me, please. Alexis, can you hear me? Alexis. Okay, can you unmute your mic and talk to me, please?
So you said how much is 8 tables? Wait, what?
8 teaspoons. How many tablespoons can I get out of 8 teaspoons?
All right.
We know that 3 teaspoons equals a tablespoon. How many times does 3 go into 8?
3 going 8. 2 point.
2 times. How many are left over?
8. 2.
2 are left over. So we know we can get 2 tablespoons and 2 teaspoons out of a half of a third of a cup. Does that make sense? So you'll see this one a lot, and that's probably one of the trickiest ones to reduce down. Okay. 1/3 of a cup is also equal to 2 2/3 ounce. Okay, so 2 2/3 of an ounce. Make sure you're filling in your chart. We're doing all this together. You will be referring to these when you're doing your assignment today, okay?
Right.
So make sure you get all of this filled in. All right, the next one, 1 cup is equal to 8 ounces. It's also equal to 16 tablespoons. So that's why we know 1/4 of a cup is 4 tablespoons. If we take 16 divided by 4, we get 4, right? What if, what's a 1/2 a cup in tablespoons? Deja, what's a 1/2 a cup in tablespoons? Deja, can you hear me? Deja. Deja. All right, Denaria, can you hear me? Go ahead and unmute and talk to me, please. Denaria, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so what is a 1/2 a cup in tablespoons? If 1 cup is 16 tablespoons, how much is a 1/2 a cup? What's 1/2 of 16? Denaria?
8.
Not right now. Wait until we're done. When they're done. I can't hear you, Denaria.
8.
8, good. So 8 tablespoons would be a 1/2 a cup. Does everybody see that? All right, 1 ounce is 2 tablespoons. 1 pint is 2 cups. It's also 16 ounces, fluid ounces. A quart is 2 pints or 4 cups or 32 fluid ounces. And then a gallon is 4 quarts or 16 cups or 128 fluid ounces. Okay. Does everybody have that on their chart? Do y'all have that on your chart? Okay. Does everybody have that on their chart? Okay. All right, let's look at weight. So with weight, in baking, you're going to typically weigh things in grams. It's going to be much more accurate than ounces, because grams is based on base 10. Do y'all remember base 10 from elementary school when you did the base, the little blocks and all that? Base 10. Okay. It's based on base 10, which is a lot easier to calculate, whereas ounces is based on 16. Okay. So anyway, for whatever that's worth, right? So a gram is going to be 0.035 ounces, which is very, very small, right? An ounce is 28.3 grams. Typically on most scales that we have access to, it only weighs, with grams, it weighs to the solid number. It doesn't do a decimal. So it's like just the solid number. Ounces, it usually will do 1 decimal point. Okay. So be mindful of that. A pound is 454 grams or 16 ounces. Okay. A teaspoon is 5 milliliters. 5 milliliters. A liter is 1.06 quarts or 33.8 fluid ounces. Sometimes you may see in a recipe where it says a dash of salt or a dash of something or a pinch of something. Okay. A dash is referring to about 1/8 of a teaspoon. A pinch is referring to about 1/16 of a teaspoon. Okay. So a pinch, literally, you get a pinch of something. A dash is kind of like 2 pinches. Okay. But most of the time you're doing stuff to taste. So when it starts talking about that, which is in more cooking as opposed to baking. Baking is more exact. A stick of butter. 1 stick of butter is 1/2 cup or 8 tablespoons. Okay. So when it tells you, your recipe may say 1/2 stick of butter. So if it said 1/2 stick of butter, how much butter would you do? Raul, how much butter would you do? If it said 1/2 stick, go ahead and unmute. Raul, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
So how much would 1/2 stick of butter be? If 1 stick is 1/2 cup or 8 tablespoons, how much would 1/2 stick be?
It would be 0.25 cups.
Okay, so which is the same as what in a fraction form? Point
Wait,
two
what? I
five
can't
is,
hear you. Like,
can you hear me?
I
So
can, but you
point-
kind of lag.
I'm lagging. Okay.
Yeah.
So 0.25 is the same as what in fraction form? What's the fraction of 0.25?
Oh. 1/4.
1/4. How many tablespoons would be in 1/2 stick?
And tablespoons. Wouldn't it be 4?
It'd be 4. Yeah. So 1/2 of 8 is 4, right? So on a stick of butter, it shows you the different measurements, the tablespoons on there. So you would count those and then cut it in the correct spot. Okay. A large egg is 4 tablespoons. Now, sometimes you may reduce a recipe to where it'll say, oh, 1/2 an egg. And you're like, how the heck do I measure 1/2 an egg? Well, you crack open an egg, mix it together, and measure out 2 tablespoons. And that would be 1/2 an egg. Okay. You will see that quite a bit because the recipes I'm going to be giving you are going to be smaller amounts. So so it'll have, you may see that quite a bit, a half an egg. Okay. 2 ounces of flour is a half a cup. Remember, flour weighs differently than it's lighter than like other items. So flour, powdered sugar, those are a lot lighter. So you're going to have more quantity of flour or powdered sugar than you would like with regular sugar. So let's say a half or 2 ounces of sugar would be a fourth of a cup, whereas 2 ounces of flour is a half a cup. Do you see the difference in that? Does that make sense? Because flour is lighter, and so it's going to weigh less for the amount that you need. Sometimes you'll see a peck of something, not really, but sometimes you'll see a peck of fruit is typically what it's referring to, fruit or vegetables, a bushel and a peck. So a peck is 2 gallons and a bushel is equal to 4 pecks or 8 gallons. So if you're dealing with like farmers markets and stuff like that, where you go and get the bushels or a peck of fruits or vegetables, then you may see that reference. Okay, so I threw that on there for you. All right, does that make sense? Make sure you have all those down. Is there anybody that does not have that down? Give me a thumbs down if you do not have it all written in on your chart. Okay, Lewis, how much do you have?
Yeah, just the right side.
Oh, jeez. Okay, so when we're at the end, I'll come back to this to where you can write it down, okay? And did everybody else get this written down? Everybody else got it? Okay, so if I don't hear from you, that means you got it. I'll pull it back up at the end. So if anybody needs to look or to hang on, fit. Okay, if anybody needs to refer back to it and finish up. Okay, so scale factor, sometimes referred to as conversion factor. This is the factor that you will multiply all your ingredient amounts by to get your new amounts, okay? So when we scale a recipe, we're either increasing or decreasing the recipe using that scale factor or conversion factor. Either term is okay, all right? To determine your scale factor, you're going to take your new amount that you want and you're going to divide it by the original amount of the recipe. And that's going to give you your scale factor. Okay. So let's do this one together. So our scale factor is what we want. Our new amount is 5. So we want 5. And our original recipe serves 2. So what are we going to do? You may want your calculator, use your phone as a calculator if you need to. What's our scale factor? How are we going to figure it out? Hey, lady. Yeah, it leaks. Yeah.
Multiply.
Okay. What do? Here's our formula. Our new amount is 5. We're going to divide it by our original amount, which is 2. What are we going to get? What's our scale factor? 2.5. So right here where the X is, we're going to put 2.5 all the way down. All right. Make sure you're putting that all the way down, just like I'm doing on mine. Okay. So let's look at our first one. We have 1/4 of a cup of butter, and we're going to multiply it by 2.5. So what are we going to do? What's 1/4 in decimal? I can't hear you. Yes, 0.25. We're going to multiply by 2.5. What are we going to get? 0.625, right? Now, how are we going to measure that in the kitchen? Yeah, we've used our calculator and got an answer, but is that going to work for us to measure it? No. So let's think about this. If we have 1/4 of a cup and we do it 2.5 times, so 1/4 and 1/4, what's that going to give us? What are 2/4?
Like a half.
A half. So we're going to have a half. Oh, sorry. So we're going to have 1/2 cup. Now, what's 1/2 of 1/4?
An eighth.
An eighth. How do we have 1/8 of a measuring cup though?
Nope.
Nope. So what can we use instead? We just talked about it in our equivalent. So if we go back up here to our equivalents, we know, 1/4 of a cup is equal to 4 tablespoons, right?
Yeah.
So if we come down here, what's 1/2 of 4? 2. So we have 2 tablespoons. Okay. Does that make sense? Yes. Guys, I need y'all to give me some feedback online because I don't know if you're understanding this or not. That's why we're going through this together, okay? All right. Make sure you let me know if you don't understand. Give me a thumbs down. Give me a comment, okay, in the chat. I need to know everybody's with me. All right. Okay, so let's do the next one. 1/2 a green pepper. So what's 1/2 and 1/2? 1/2 and 1/2 is what?
Is 1.
Is 1. So we've got 1 green pepper. And then what's 1/2 of a 1/2?
That's a quarter.
Would be 1/4 or 1/4, right? So we would have 1 1/4 green pepper. Does everybody see how we're doing that? If when you have a decimal like 2.5, on most of these, it's easier to do the double the amount and then half the amount to get your converted stuff, just because your decimals, like it's not going to work out easily on most of them. All right, so this next one's easy. What you have 1 ounce of sliced mushrooms. I can't even talk. You're going to multiply them by 2.5. How much mushrooms are you going to have?
2.5 ounces.
2.5 ounces. Good. All right, now with 1/3 cup, here's one of the tricky ones. So 1/3 of a cup, we're going to double that. So what's 1/3 times 2? 2/3. And then we're going to add, oh, hang on. Make sure you put your units on there. 2/3 of a cup. Now what's 1/2 of 1/3 of a cup? Remember, we talked about it back over here on our equivalents. Remember, 1/3 of a cup is equal to 16 teaspoons. What's 1/2 of 16?
8.
8. So 8 teaspoons. What can we reduce that 8 down to as far as tablespoons and teaspoons? No, remember it's 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. So 3 goes into 8 how many times? 2. So we've got 2 tablespoons. And then how many teaspoons are left?
Which is 1?
Well, we've got 3, 6. There's 2 teaspoons left, right? Because we had 8. So 2 teaspoons. And remember our abbreviations for stuff. Tablespoon is big T, teaspoon is little t. Okay? So saves room. And obviously C is for cup. Does everybody understand that? That's probably one that you want to memorize. For 1/3, half of a third of a cup is going to be 2 tablespoons, 2 teaspoons. Does everybody see how we got that? Okay. Thank you, Valeria, for giving me some feedback. Everybody else seems to be ignoring me. All right. So 1/4 of a teaspoon. This one's going to look similar to the top one, except for we're doing teaspoons instead. So 1/4 of a teaspoon, 2 times that is going to give us what?
A half.
A half a teaspoon. Oops. So a half a teaspoon. And then what's half of a fourth?
An eighth.
An eighth. So then we'll do an eighth of a teaspoon. Okay, now how do we measure an eighth of a teaspoon if we don't have an eighth of a teaspoon measure? What are we going to do? But the smallest we have is 1/4 of a teaspoon. How can we measure an eighth of a teaspoon? What could you do? Any ideas?
Check back to the equivalent.
No, like if you were really measuring an eighth of a teaspoon and all you had was 1/4 of a teaspoon, how are you going to measure that? No guesses? No. When you're actually measuring an eighth of a teaspoon, because you'll see that sometimes, and you only have 1/4 of a teaspoon available to you, you're going to take half of that 1/4 of a teaspoon. So it's not going to be exact measurement because you don't have an eighth of a teaspoon, but you're going to use that 1/4 and only fill it up halfway and use that in your measurement. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, guys, online? Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense.
I guess.
You'll basically do half of that 1/4 of a teaspoon if you need to measure an eighth. Okay. Now we've got 1/8 of a teaspoon of black pepper. We want to multiply that by 2. What are we going to get? What's double of an eighth? 1/4. So we've got 1/4 of a teaspoon plus, now what's half of an eighth?
1/16.
1/16. Now, what did we say earlier? 1/16 was
Like.
right here. A pinch, right? So we're going to do a pinch. So 1/4 of a teaspoon and a pinch. Okay? Does that make sense? All right, what about our 1/4 of a cup? What's double a 1/4?
Half.
Half. So a half a cup. And then what's half of a 1/4?
Eighth.
An eighth, but we don't have an eighth of a measuring cup. So what are we going to do?
Fill half of it.
Yeah, so you're going to do half of a 1/4, which is, how else can we measure that? That eighth. How can we measure that eighth? Because we don't have an eighth of a cup. We're not going to fill half of the 1/4 of a cup. No. What are we going to convert it to? What are we going to convert it to?
Tablespoons.
To tablespoons, and measure it in how many tablespoons is half of a fourth? Look at the first answer, guys. 2 tablespoons, yes. A lot of these are kind of repetitive. You can also, because this is a liquid, you can also convert this into ounces. So a fourth of a cup is how many ounces? We have that right here. How many ounces is a fourth of a cup? 2. So we could put here, this is 2 ounces. So what's 2.5 times 2?
Is 2.
What's 2.5 times 2?
5.
5. So we could do 5 ounces also and measure it in a liquid measuring cup and just go to 5 ounces. And that's probably going to be the best way to measure the milk, most accurate. Okay. Do you see how we did that? Okay. Same thing with chicken broth. Okay. Chicken broth. Let's go ahead and convert that into ounces. How many ounces is 3/4 of a cup? If 1/4 is 2 ounces, 3/4 is how many ounces?
6.
6. Good. So 6 ounces. What's 6 times 2.5?
12 and about 3.
You can use your
15.
calc- 15. Good. So 15 ounces. See how we did that? So with liquids, it's going to be easier to convert it into ounces and multiply it. Okay. Now, 1 cup of cube chicken. How much cube chicken are we going to do? That one's easy.
1 cup.
1 cup is the original amount, and we need enough for 5. So we're going to take our 1 cup times 2.5 is going to give us what?
2 cups. And then
2.
about
2.5 cups. 2.5 cups of chicken. Does that make sense? Does everybody, do y'all understand the process? Do y'all understand the process online? Yes? Is there anybody that is confused about any of them? Okay. Make sure you give me a thumbs up, or if you're confused, give me a thumbs down. Okay, so we already went through and did those. Now, let's do this one. This one, we're reducing. Our original recipe was 8, and we only want to do 4. So what is our scale factor? How are we going to figure our scale factor? Remember, new amount divided by original amount is going to give us our scale factor. So our new amount is 4. We divide it by 8. What is that going to give us? What is that going to give us? 4 divided by 8.
like
So 8, we want 4, and we're going to divide it by 8. 0.5. Okay, so our scale factor is 0.5 on this one. Okay, we're basically halving this recipe, right? So we want to make sure we've got 0.5. All right. So what's half of a fourth? An eighth. How are we going to measure an eighth? We just did on the last one. Remember, a fourth. That's why some of these, that's why you want to memorize them, because it'll make it easy where you can just spout it off. So we know that 4 tablespoons is equal to a fourth of a cup. What's half of that? What's half of 4, guys?
it's 2.
2. I need everybody to unmute and answer kind of together. Lewis and the 2 here in person are the only ones that are giving me answers. So I need everybody to chime in, please. All right, so 2 tablespoons is half. All right, 6 cloves. What's half of 6? 3. Vanessa, what's half of 1 can? 1 16-ounce can.
8 ounces.
8 ounces. Thank you. Let's see. Valeria, what's half of a half a teaspoon? Valeria, can you hear me? Valeria? Valeria?
Miss, can I answer this one?
Yeah.
1/4.
1/4. Good. So 1/4 teaspoon, right?
Yep.
Oh, hers was not working. Okay. Denaria, what's half of 3/4 of a teaspoon? This one's tricky. Denaria, can you hear me? Denaria. All right. Regina, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay. What's half of 3/4 of a teaspoon? And this one's a little bit tricky. It's going to be a 2-parter. Okay.
Mhm.
So let's break it down for you. 3/4 of a teaspoon is 3 1/4, right?
Mhm.
So what's half of let's say we had 2 of them. Let's say we had a half. What's half of a half?
Right.
What's half of a half? I know that. Is that making sense what I'm asking you?
Like half of a half?
So if you had I need to draw this. If you had 3 1/4 and you divided those in half, what would you have left? Try to visualize. 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. I'm dividing it in half, so I'm going to have 1 1/4. I'll have a 1/4 and then a half a 1/4, right? Which is an
Right.
8. Does that make sense?
Kind
Can you
of.
visualize that? See, I get pictures in my head when I'm doing measuring.
Mhm.
so I picture it as 3 1/4. I divide it in half. That leaves me 1 1/4 and then a half of a 1/4, which is an 1/8, right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to have a 1/4 of a teaspoon plus an 1/8 of a teaspoon. Oops.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Does that make sense? Do you see how I
Yeah.
did that one? Okay.
Mhm.
I was trying to do a picture, but I don't have anything to draw a picture for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So that one's kind of tricky. If it's in cups, if it's like 3/4 of a cup, makes it a little bit easier in that you can convert your cups into tablespoons. So 3/4 of a cup would be 12 tablespoons because we know there's 16 tablespoons in 1 cup. So 3/4 of a cup would give us 12 tablespoons, and then we would half that and we'd have 6 tablespoons.
Mhm.
And if we reduce that down, that would be a 1/4 and 2 tablespoons. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did I just confuse you a whole bunch more?
No, I understood.
Okay. All right. Tablespoon. Let's see, Raul. What's half of a tablespoon? What do we got to do first? Raul,
Maybe
can you hear
I
me?
answer this one?
Yeah.
Would it be 1 1/2 of a teaspoon?
That is correct. Yes. So 1.5 teaspoons, because remember, 1 tablespoon is 3 teaspoons, right? So what's half of the 3 is going to give you the 1.5 teaspoon. Raul, why don't you do the next one? What's half of the 8 leaves?
Okay.
What's the answer on that one? What's half of 8?
4.
4. That was easy, right? All right. And then Denaria, can you hear me now? Denaria? I don't know if she can hear me. Deja, can you hear me? Deja or Denaria, can either of you guys hear me and unmute? We are having issues here.
I could hear you a bit, but it breaks up. I don't
It breaks up.
I
Okay.
hear like the end of your sentence.
Okay. What's half of 1 cup? So what's Denaria? What's half of 1 cup?
8 tablespoons.
It would be 8 tablespoons. What's another measurement? What's an easier measurement for it? Instead of measuring
Well,
out
half a cup.
a half a cup. Yeah, you could do 8 tablespoons, but then you're not going to have as much accuracy as if you just did 1/2 cup. Okay. Does that make sense? So, Denaria, that would be correct. 8 tablespoons is correct. However, measuring but you want to try to measure as little as possible. So, like if it would be better to do 1/2 cup than to do 8 tablespoons for accuracy purposes. Okay. And actually weighing stuff is going to be even more accurate. But anyway, all right. So check your answers. All those should be correct if you don't have those. So these are your notes to be able to do your assignment. So this recipe conversion practice. Can everybody see my screen online?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So there are 2 recipes. The first recipe is you're going to increase your conversion factor is 3. And then on this one, your conversion factor is 1/2. So you're going to half this recipe. Okay. So you have 2 recipes, write your answers here, and then you will turn all of these in as well as yesterday's recipe and measuring module on your slides. Okay. There were several things on that one that you needed to make sure that you completed. Is that clear?